Jeff Love, who went to Canada for this hike. Take it away, Jeff.
We did this hike in 2011. Yoho is in, or Lake O'Hara is in Yoho, which is in British Columbia, on the west side of the divide. Banff is to the east of it. Yoho, Banff, Jasper, and Kootenai National Parks are part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. O'Hara is in the province of British Columbia, near the border of Alberta, down in the southeast part. To the right is a blow-up of the area. Yellow is Yoho. Below it is Kootenai in brown, and it's also in British Columbia. Across the divide in Alberta are Banff purple and Jasper green. O'Hara is west of Lake Louise and Moraine Lake. Blue line represents driving 18 miles between Lake Louise and O'Hara, approximately 6 miles as the raven flies. We parked in a gravel lot near Trans-Canada 1 and took a bus 7 miles down a gravel road into the campground. Access to O'Hara is limited in order to preserve the sensitive alpine environment. About 180 to 200 people per day are allowed in via the shuttle system. That includes day users, campers such as we were, guided groups, lodge guests, backcountry hut visitors. This is a photo showing the common eating area at the campground, and the boxes are bear boxes. No food was allowed at the tents because of bear procedures. This is Susan leaving the campground. The access road is to the right side, and the campground is to the left side. They have quite an extensive system of trails here. If you follow along the left side of the lake, which is west, and follow the red line going down, that was where we started our loop, up to Opaban Lake. And then we came back down towards the right side of that loop, back down to Lake O'Hara. Then we proceeded to the right along that red line to Lake Oessa, and then back again along the top side of the lake to the campground. So these are the cabins that are along the lake. Options are day visits, camping, Lake O'Hara Lodge, the Elizabeth Parker Hut up in Alpine Meadow west of the lake. 1926 lodge has 8 rooms at $1,055 a night Canadian. 15 cabins at $1,495 a night, which is about $1,100 US. Each offers creature comforts such as meals for the guests, and they include the shuttle in, so it's quite a deal. We did our hike then up the right side of that rock feature. It's called the Opaban, Opaban Promontory, and came back down to the lake again along the left side of that.
Wow.
Lake O'Hara is about 66, 75 feet above sea level. This view looks eastwards across O'Hara towards the divide. Lake Louise and Moraine Lake would be on the other side. We hiked along the opposite side of that lake when we went towards Oessa and up over that ridge towards the divide. View of some timber down in the water. The water was extremely clear, and ducks along the shore. So the first part of our hike was going up to Opaban. following this red line. This is one of the trail signs that they had along there. Susan's climbing up in the shade. You can barely make her out there. But I believe that behind her is Mount Schaefer, about 8830 feet above sea level. And this is a view back north. Mary Lake is in the foreground, and Lake O'Hara is in the far back right. And snow in the Canadian Rockies in July. Who would have thought that? And we're continuing up along Schaefer and towards the plateau. Looking back to the north, you can see Susan's broken a path through the snow for me, so very nice of her. Pays to be second place. And she's making more of a path for me, heading up to the plateau. We're looking south towards the plateau, and we are, heading up towards Opaban, excuse me. Opaban Plateau, looking back to the north, Waxy Peaks and Mount Huber. Huber is the taller one. It's about 10,985 feet above sea level. And a marmot along our way. And he's not too graceful, I guess. He took a header. This is up on Opaban Plateau, one of the lakes up there. And we're looking north towards Huggabee Lake. While climbing up the ridge further to the south will be Opaban Lake. And this is the ridge that we're going to cross to get to Opaban with Mount Schaefer behind me. So this is Opaban Lake, about 7,500 feet above sea level, and not really a day for a dip. And a beggar. Now we're heading back north towards Huggabee Lake again, and we came up towards the left side. We're going to go back down towards O'Hara along the right side. And this is heading north on the East Opaban Trail, Mount Huber in reflection. And we're looking back to the south towards the ridge that we just crossed with Opaban on the other side. That's just the trail heading north towards Waxy Peaks. And below us is Lake O'Hara. Now we're back at the lake, and we just completed the red portion. We're going to do the green portion around the east side of the lake, and then head up and east towards Lake Oessa. We're looking westward across Lake O'Hara, and you can make out the cabins a little bit along the lake with Mount Schaefer behind it, or behind them. And Susan's working away along the east side of the lake. That rock feature, vertical rock feature, will go along the front of that and then hang a right and start heading east towards Oessa. And now we're climbing back to and looking back west, down towards the cabins and Schaefer. That's Opaban Prospect, that feature up above the cabins. We kind of circled that. And climbing upwards. And once again, looking down at the cabins out on the point with Schaefer behind. Rocky Trail in the Rocky Mountains, heading up towards the divide. We won't go there. Just more of the scenery along the way. So the ridge to the right, we've seen that in the past. From down low, we'll go around that, and the lake will be up a ways behind that. And I believe this is Yuknes Lake. And there's a divide that we're heading to the lake that'll be below it. And they had some nice steps along the way that they'd built. Victoria Falls that we pass. And this is Victoria Lake looking back to the west towards Mount Schaefer again. This is Lake Owessa, about 74-50 above sea level. No swimming here either today. And just enjoying the lake here. This is the Continental Divide. I believe to the right is Mount Lafoy, or excuse me, to the left. About 230 above sea level. And there's an Abbott Pass hut that would be up to the left there at the border that goes towards Banff National Park. Lake Louise is less than 5 miles away if you can fly. And another beggar. Okay, so we've done the red and we've done the green. Parallel to the green is a blue line that will go along the left side of the lake also. And it's about 2 miles back to my sleeping bag. So Lafoy Lake, we're kind of just retracing our steps at this point. And a little bit more climbing along the nice path that they've built. We passed this ridge once before, Euchinus Lake, and more Euchinus with some cairns built. And our last view of Euchinus, and heading towards Mount Schaefer here, towards the west. And heading downstairs. So we're back down along the north shore of Lake O'Hara, looking south at the cabins again. Opaben Prospect is to the left in the sun. We'd circled that earlier. And last view of the cabins with the prospect behind it. The tall mountain that you see is Euchinus at about 9340. And almost back for dinner. So we traveled about, this was before we had all trails. So this is just kind of piecing some things together. But it's about 7.4 miles. Adding all of these up, the Opaben Loop that we did was about 3.2. Excuse me. 1.7 for Owessa, and back to the campground about 2. And cutting some things from all trails and piecing things together, but we gained about 1,128 for the first part, and about 1,000 for the second part, heading back. And that's it. Thanks for coming. Yes. Oh my gosh, Susan.
This is the elevation profile of the Wonderland Trail. We did this in an 8-night backpacking trip. So again, it's 93 miles and it's about 22,000 accumulated feet gain. So a couple things to point out though that are very nice about this trail is we had 3 food caches, which for an 8-night is amazing. The blue stars are the food caches. And as I said before, we went counterclockwise, so we actually started towards the right side of it and went left. Now, one thing I might want to mention about the food cache, one of them that we did was at Mowich Lake. And was it last winter or whatever, during a storm, the bridge fell down. And so that food supply, or resupply place is no longer an option, but there's one pretty close by. So here we are on day one. I'm on the left, Beth's in the middle, and her friend Heather is on the right. And we look clean and happy and excited. But 30 minutes into the trail, we donned DEET because we ran into some mosquitoes. So this, shortly after we stopped to put the mosquitoes on, we were just blown away by the meadows and meadows of wildflowers and the vistas that we saw. It was amazing. Then as we started getting closer and closer to our overnight spot, this is the vista and the wildflowers we saw. It just did not disappoint. We were so excited on day one. It was just amazing. That stone structure that you see there is actually a shelter. If you went on a group, you could actually reserve that stone shelter. This was by far the most beautiful of the night's shelter camps that we were at. So day two, we had to go up and over the snowfield, and this we were quite apprehensive about. We had quite a lot of discussion about whether to bring traction, which I have microspikes, but they can weigh a pound. And so I decided I was going to go out without the microspike because I didn't want to carry them the whole time for just a one day. Beth, of course, more cautious, she brought her microspikes. But we had to climb up, and that was quite tricky, but the big thing was how steep the snowfield was to come down. And you can see on the top right, that is Beth coming down very carefully. And then there's me, and I just decided to glissade down. That was the safest way I could think to come down. So these are just some pictures of just the wildflowers, and there were dozens more. The wildflowers, there was such a variety. They were in just huge meadows and valleys of just wildflowers. And that one in the middle that kind of looks like how my hair looks when I wake up in the morning, that one is actually called Mouse on a Stick. And I love that name. It's called Mouse on a Stick. Mm-hmm. So those pictures were not taken by me. They were actually taken by Beth. And in my opinion, I'm not an expert, but she is an amazing photographer with just her iPhone. And she really works at it. Here if I should have blown that up, you can see how much she is focused on just a flower to take a picture of. She takes like 30 pictures of just one flower. I have seen her lay on the ground and, of course with the 35-pound pack on her back, in every angle possible to try to get the best picture. She really works at it, but they're amazing. So we did see some wildlife. The top picture on the left, those are goats. We saw those on our first day. And we were, by prairie dogs, I think, just playing around in the lupin fields. They were just so cute to watch. And of course, we saw some marmots and heard the marmots for sure. Some grizzly-looking toads or frogs, I'm not sure. And of course, we did see some bear. So this one has a little bit of a story. I'm on this bridge, and I am taking a video of this bear on the opposite shore. Beth and Heather had already crossed the bridge, and they were waiting on the other side for me. I'm standing on the bridge videoing it, and then the bear gets up on the bridge and starts galloping towards me. Not charging me, just galloping towards me. He didn't want to go in that water either. I don't blame him. It was very cold. But so he's just coming towards me. I'm like, oh shit. So I start slowly backing up on this bridge. I finally get to the end of the bridge, and the bear looks up at me, and his eyes get really big, and he just launches off of that bridge like 20 feet away and lands on the shore and then runs away. I'm barely breathing. But I look over across the shore, and Beth and Heather are bent over laughing. I'm like, great friends, great friends. They said they wouldn't have laughed if I would have gotten attacked, but I don't know. All right, so there were lots of bridges that we had to cross. I'm very, very grateful for them because some of those rivers were raging rivers. But they weren't necessarily the best of bridges. You can see the first one where the water's coming over the bridge and you're hoping you're not going to, be pushed off. There were some that were so narrow you had to sidestep to go across. And then, there were some that were in disrepair, almost broken down. But, there were bridges nonetheless, and we made them across them. And then, of course, there were the cable bridges. I hate cable bridges. Even though we made sure only one person was on the bridge at a time, it still sways. I don't care. And this one is long. You can see how long this is. And I'm just always terrified that one of those boards is going to break under my feet and I'm just going to plummet to my death. Never happens, but in my mind, that's what's going to happen. So I'm hyperventilating going across this bridge, but I hate them, hate them. As a matter of fact, I hate them so much that I learned the next morning that we had to go back over this bridge. Or we could take a detour and we could go up and over Spray Park. You know what I did. I went up and over Spray Park. Now, I'm a Seattleite and I know when the weather's predicted to be bad, it's gonna be bad. I know that, and there's no views. The only reason you really go over Spray Park is if you want to see amazing vistas. Well, if rain was forecasted that day, I didn't care. I still wanted to go up and over Spray Park. I hate those bridges. And of course, Beth, being such a kind person, decided she had to go with me since Heather was going to go with two other guys and they weren't going to bother going over Spray Park. So anyway, we started climbing up and it was beautiful at first, just gorgeous, just a rocky tundra, and we're above the tree line. And very, very pretty, but it started drizzling. And it was such a hard climb, we were in shorts and a t-shirt. No problem, the drizzle felt great. But then that turned to rain. So then we put on our raincoats and for some reason, we could not get Beth's raincoat zipped. Just wouldn't zip. And so then the rain turned to sleet. And then the wind started. And then, of course, then we're trekking through snow. And I think each of us fell at least twice. I think Beth post-holed one time, which means you go off the track or the snow gives way and your leg falls through like, up to your thigh or something like that. It's not very fun. So anyway, and Beth, of course, wears glasses. So she's constantly having to do her glasses. And at one point, we decided, okay, we got to put on rain pants. And that was just a comedy because we could not, with our hands just frozen and we're shivering, we're so cold, we just could not get those pants up. And then we had to try to put the gloves back on with wet hands. It was just, I'm just sorry, Beth. I'm just sorry. It was a mistake. So, but we finally reached the top. I had to coax her because she wanted to turn around, but I was not going to go over that cable bridge and I was not going to do that elevation climb again. But we finally get to the top and then we look down and we see, there's tree cover down below. So we kind of hurried into the tree cover and it stopped raining. And so then we had to hike about an hour, and then we ran into Heather and the guys. They were dry. They didn't get wet at all. They had just gone to the resupply at Mowich Lake, and now Heather has done many long trails, and she knows how to do it. Her resupply, she has potato chips and candy bars and chocolate, and we had protein bars. So we missed out on that resupply, but Beth and I went to get our resupply, and we're shivering so hard we can't function. We can't. We're just shaking. And I'm getting a little worried, like we might be in hypothermia. Yeah, pretty sure. Tried making hot chocolate, that didn't faze us at all. And then this gentleman came up and said, "Hey, do you mind if we share your picnic table?" Sure. He's like, I support the marathoners that are running, you know, around the trail in 3 days. And so I'm the resupply for them. And he said, hey, do you guys want to use our propane heaters? Sure, sure. We sat in front of those propane heaters for an hour. We were drying our socks and drying our underwear. We didn't care. We just had to get warm. So we finally made it to the camp about 6 o'clock that night, and we were almost dry by the time we got there. So this is actually our last night. We're at Snow Lake, and it's beautiful, beautiful aquamarine lake. And you know, I'm like soaking my feet because I'm like 8 days hiking. I'm tired, and just marveling at the beauty. And then I'm in the tent. This last picture is actually the sunset from inside my tent. And I just marveled at just what an opportunity this was. This was just an amazing gift. So if you ever have a chance to do it, it's worth it. Anyway, thank you. Anybody?
What time of year did you do it?
This was August 2nd. So yeah, usually when the wildflowers are at their peak is right then. Yes? You have to have a plastic bucket, and you just put in whatever you want and you mail it there. Yes, and then you go. What's that?
Tell them where you want it.
Yeah, you have to put the exact label on the bucket, and yeah. Anybody else? Okay.
Okay, well, let's get back to some better weather hikes, huh? And the Italian Dolomites. And I have to say, my wife and I, and Adventure Bob and Adventure Peggy Shea, were on this hike. Bob organized the hike really for us. And we did it at the right time of the year, September, in Italy, in the Dolomites. The fellow on the right here is, we believe, the first hiker that ever hiked Dolomites. This is Otzi, and he was discovered in ice in the region in 1991, and as they studied him and so forth, they estimate he lived and hiked in the Dolomites around 3500 BC. So probably the first hiker. Here's just a brief shot of Italy and the mountain ranges they have. Up in the upper part of Italy, you see on the left the Alps, which extend all the way around the upper part. The left part of the Alps is where, of course, Mont Blanc is, the highest peak. And in the right part, we're close to the Austrian border, and that's where the Dolomites are. The mountain range down the spine of Italy is called the Apennines, and of course is most known for Mount Vesuvius in the south. And this is our area where we hiked. I'm going to discuss really because they blended together the first 2 days of our adventure there. And the first hike we took was in Lago de Bray area. You see the lake in the upper part there of the thing, and it's one of the most beautiful lakes in the Dolomite region. The second part of our 2-day hike was down from the town of Cortina d'Ampezzo, which you probably saw a lot in the Winter Olympics. That was because it was quite a headquarters for the events. This is Lago de Bray, and a beautiful lake surrounded by mountains, and it's particularly noted for being the beginning of what they call the Alta Via hike, which can be a several-day hike that groups take going through different parts of the Dolomites. Here we are on our first day. Bob told me it was going to be a warm-up hike, However, it ended up being 1,000 meters of climbing. And so here's Karen and I on the way up. And once again, on the way up, you'll see the cable rope there, which, because these passages are quite narrow in parts here, you may want to grab onto as you're negotiating some of them. And Karen looking happy. And up, it was ascend. And Bob and Peggy, I mean, they had no problem. So they're on the trail there. Karen deciding how to negotiate this tricky little part here. And, but doing a great job of it. There we are, still looking reasonably happy, but there's still a lot of climbing to do. And finally, we get to the top of this particular climb. Again, about over 1,000 meters of it. And so finally, we're smiling again. And even Bob and Peggy are smiling. And of course, the Italian refugios are famous for their welcoming aspects and their great food. And so we stopped and had a great meal here and met some new friends. And I think Karen is talking to one right there. Very unusual for her to do that, but yeah. And we had run into a REI hiking group that was involved in doing the Alta Via routes, and they would stop at the different refugios. And am I blocking your view? I am, I think. And go each day. But so we talked to the guide there and said, well, should we just go back down the way we came to the lake, or can we go around, loop around, and go back down to the lake? He said, oh, the trail is great, just do the loop and go back down. So we started off, and what he didn't tell us was that there had been a tremendous rock slide, landslide, and just covered a great part of the trail going back, a significant part, to the extent that you could actually get lost in not knowing where the trail was actually going. But anyway, this kind of gives a sense of the scree that then Karen and I had to negotiate very carefully. Bob and Peggy just went on ahead, and and there we were wondering, are we ever going to get down through this? Because it was like you try and take one step and you slide 3 more, or sit on your butt. However, we found some friends along the way. Great people. The 2 gals here are Italian. The fellow was from Germany, but they were hiking together, and they said, don't worry, we're going to stay with you until you negotiate through this rock part and get down the hill. And they did, and they were so nice. It was great. And Karen felt a lot better, I know. And of course, at the end of it, we had to celebrate. So there we were. Well, okay, so we then moved to Cortina d'Ampezzo, a great town and a famous ski town also there in the winter, actually known as the Queen of the Dolomites. And as I say, the Olympics had a great role there. And this is a shot of Cortina. The downtown, we kind of, that night, went downtown just to see what it was like. Well, the local Porsche Club was having their dinner at the hotel there, and all lined up, all these great Porsches there lined up. And then there were some other odd characters that were in in front of the hotel on an old rustic motorcycle type thing. And again, very stylish shops there and so forth. So quite interesting. Well, since Karen and I had let Bob know for sure that, we really didn't appreciate having to go through all that rock scree stuff, Bob said, well, you plan the next route then, okay? So I said, okay, and got the maps together that night and decided to do the Sanctuary route, which for all you Italians, anyway, the 5 towers is how that translates. And the best way to do it really was take the cable car up to the get-off point to do the hike, which I planned was a little bit more contoury than just ascend, descend. And so this was the refugio that we started out from, and we took our beginners' shots there, tremendous vistas of the mountains and the cloud action is just great. And the weather was perfect. You couldn't have asked for a better day. They even had a bike charger up there at the refugio. I guess people bring their, on the gondola, bring the e-bike up probably and then do the trails. So, and there you can see Bob and Peggy. Again, we're starting out in the hike and just the scale of the mountains there. And so this is the first part of the trail where we went, and you can see in the lower right kind of where the trail is going. And since I was the supposed leader of this hike, I started following the trail. Well, Bob decided he'd go over this cow path to take a shortcut down in there, and I think things got pretty muddy for him on that, and suddenly I heard, Roger, we're going to join you. And they retraced and came back and joined me on the way. So I felt good about that. Here's a bit of kind of a panorama again of what we're looking at there, where we're going. This even is a little bit of a video showing much of that again. And I'll just move on from that. And here we are on the trail. We can see up in the upper right there, the Refugio Inn, and this is Peggy and I moving along. You can see how the trail contours. Well, when we kicked off at the first Refugio, there was this cat there that was wandering around, and we saw it and everything. By the time we got to the next Refugio, the cat was there again. And so Peggy, of course, picked the cat up. How did that cat make it all? And we did, ahead of us. But anyway, that's what that was about. And this was the Refugio, the second Refugio that we came by on the hike. And they even had some locals doing music in the hike there, and really it was quite amazing. I thought, quite amazing. And here we are taking a break again. Just every time you stopped, you just drink in what you were looking at. Again, it was a perfect day, and the mountains, the forests, and everything around, and you just had to enjoy it. And suddenly we came upon a couple horses. They're not wild horses, but they were free ranging, I guess. And so Peggy immediately was in hog heaven because a big lover of the horse. So we had to get a shot of her there, and moved on. There we see actually how short Bob is. He's really not that tall, and this shot I know proves it. So, and me looking very, I don't know, wistfully, I guess, and great cloud action going on in the whole day. Finally, here you are looking at the 5 towers. You see the 3 principal ones, and then the next 2 are kind of tucked behind as you go to the right of that formation. This is looking at the back side of it again, and once we were completing the hike, and of course, the final celebration. Thank you.
So I'm going to start off by going a little bit of Bear Peak. And Little Bear Peak is shown in the background there, that high point. So you might think that this is a simple question. How many 14ers are there in Colorado? Well, the Colorado Mountain Club says, of course, it's got to be 14,000 feet or higher. It also says that it has to have a prominence of at least 300 feet. Prominence is how much the peak rises above the lowest saddle to a higher peak. And that's to avoid and separate these little bumps on the ridge as you're going up to a peak. But there is a lot of uncertainty about, well, the 300-foot prominence. The Colorado Mountain Club now recognizes 53. When I finished in July of 2011, there was 54. So I guess I did an extra one. But besides that, there is also this soft list where people like Jerry Roach, who is a famous mountain climber in Colorado, says there actually is 59. And so depending on what list, there's anywhere from 58 to 60. And since I didn't know which list to do, I just did all 60. It seemed easier. So this is the list of the 14ers. And you can see, I back up here 1 second. I wanted to talk about this slide. That is the famous knife edge that goes up to Capitol Peak, which is a 14er. And most people get on that knife edge and they straddle and they kind of push themselves along. And of course, my wife, Sally, she's like, nah, I'll just go across by. And I'll tell you, this spot, if you don't like exposure, you're not going across there. Because that's 2,000 feet down on both sides of that point. You don't want to slip. And I was going, Sally, don't do that. Here's the list. The highest peak is Mount Elbert, 14,440 feet, which is a little below Mount Whitney in California. The lowest peak, the 53rd peak on the Colorado Mountain list, is only 1 feet above 14,000 feet. I have all 53 here, and then the additional 7 peaks that I've done that are on the list of 60. This picture was taken from the top of North Maroon Bells, and you can see I was up there with the mountain goats. One thing I want to add here, and I want to encourage people, there's a lot of Class 2 peaks here, which Class 2 is just taking the trail, just a nice trail actually, and switchbacks from a trailhead up to the peak. So a lot of you could actually, if you want to, do this. And how many here have done a Colorado 14er? Yeah, quite a few, quite a few. This shows the location of the 14ers. There's 14ers all over on the western side of the state, and many of you are probably familiar with Long's Peak, which is up in the upper north part, which is at Rocky Mountain National Park, and of course Pikes Peak, which is right by Colorado Springs. The peak I'm going to talk about is in the lower part here in the San Diego Cristo Range, and it's called Little Bear. And an official and legitimate ascent is typically thought of, you're actually hiking and climbing from a trailhead below the peak, and most of them are at least 3,000 feet below the peak, and then climbing up to the actual summit. There are a couple peaks, of course. Pikes Peak and Mount Evans that you can drive to the top and then get out, walk from the parking lot and go over to the peak. And so I'm kind of saying that's not a legitimate ascent. And I think Bob Shea would agree with me, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? Okay. I thought he would agree with me. If you want to do any research or hike a 14er, this 14ers, I forgot the R, 14ers.com is a great resource because they have all the trails. They got tons of pictures, descriptions, and how to get to the trailhead. So if you want to do a 14er, go there, you get all the information you want. And then there's some other books that give all kinds of information. Jerry Roach is Mr. 14er in Colorado, and he has a book that's very good. I got a couple books up here if anybody wants to come up and look at them. So I'm going to be talking about Little Bear, which is in the background there. And why is it my favorite? Well, I completed all the 14ers on this peak. Very challenging. It was a class 4. I did a non-standard route. I didn't take the standard route, and I'll discuss why I didn't do that. It was a 5,500-foot climb. It was incredibly rewarding. It was 10 miles round trip, but I did it in July of 2011. Took me over 14 hours. This is a map showing the location, and it's about 13 miles south of the Great Sand Dunes National Park, and in between Alamosa and Olsenburg in the south of Colorado. The blue line is the actual standard route, which is a round trip of about 18 miles and a total elevation gain of 6,800. People go in and backpack to where the arrow is pointed, and that's called Lake Como there. Spend the night, and then go up and do Ellingwood and Blanca, and then the next day, usually after that, they do the trail that goes over to Little Bear. And the interesting thing about this trail, I went with the Colorado Mountain Club back in 1996, and I signed up, and Sally, my wife, signed up, who I didn't know, and we met on that hike. So this area, besides being my last 14er, which was years later, was also where I met my wife. So this means a lot to me. Instead of going this blue route, the standard route, and there's a reason why I didn't want to go that route, because there's what's called a bowling alley, and I'll show you the bowling alley in a while. It's an hourglass where it's very dangerous. I didn't want to do that, so I found this off-trail route, and as some of you know here, I kind of like to do off-trail stuff. And it was starting at the end of this four-wheel drive road. It's shown here in red, going up through the trees and juniper pines up above tree line, up to that ridge, taking the ridge all the way around to the peak. So we started, and again, as I said, there was no trail, and there were some ribbons down below in the trees, and we tried to follow those as best we could. We started early at 5 a.m., and it was our third try, actually, on this peak. And here we got above tree line. That's Sally going up the ascent to the ridge. And you can see Mount Blanca there in the background behind that other ridge. So we got up to the ridge, and we're going, oh boy, we got a long ways to go on this. But obviously we could see the whole route from there. And it was going up along the ridge and up, and it goes up to this sub-peak called South Little Bear, which that peak is actually only 9 feet shorter than the actual Little Bear peak. And here's Sally going, what are we doing? You can see the trail was, well, there wasn't a trail. And here, if you think the trails in Catalina are rocky, this probably has that beat, and it was really steep. And once I got up high enough, there was a corner I had to go around, and this was kind of like a mini knife edge, and there was a lot of exposure here. And right after this knife edge, I had to down climb about 12, 15 feet, and there was a ledge across, and I had to take that to get up to South Little Bear. And here I got on top of the South Little Bear, which I said was only 9 feet shorter than the actual peak, and I'm going, oh, there's the peak over there, and that ridge looks pretty nasty. But it's like so close, but yet so far, right? So I can't show you much in this picture, but towards the South Little Bear, or Little Bear Peak, there is a chute, and I'll go get to that. And I was almost to South Little Bear, and this shows where the standard route comes up, right where that arrow. And that's the reason I didn't want to do this route, because that's an hourglass, very smooth. There's a rope in there that you use to climb in. And the reason it's so dangerous, besides that you have to use the rope to climb up in there, it's called the bowling alley for a reason. All those loose rocks, people get up above you, and there's no way they can keep from knocking rocks loose. And of course you wear a helmet in there, but if you get hit by one, I decided I didn't want to take the chance. And so I got to the peak, and just to prove to Bob that I made it, I took a picture of the trail registry, and it says, Little Bear Peak, 14,037 feet. I put my name there, and I put finally, because I had a goal to do all 54 14ers before I turned 54. It took me 29 years. And then, of course, I was on the peak, and I'm going, oh, I got to go back. Crap. I didn't like that at all. I was like, oh, that ridge was not fun. So I got back, and then there was Sally going, really? We got to go back? Yeah. And it was a long way. And we got to, and it was a beautiful day, so we didn't have to hurry. And we got to, this is the end of the ridge before we started to kind of do the final descent down. Here we're going down, and we didn't know where the truck was because there wasn't really trail, and we couldn't find where to go. We ended up about a half mile down from the truck, which wasn't fun once we got down to the road. Here we are, we're going down almost to tree line, and as we get to tree line, Sally steps over this rattlesnake, and then he got kind of mad. And then we saw another one in another rock behind us, and we were really surprised because we were at 11,000 feet. I was really surprised to see a rattlesnake up there. Yeah, I didn't know they went up that high. So after 14 and a half hours, I was there, and I was exhausted, and I was really tired, and I was really thirsty, and I was beat up. I had fallen a couple times, and I had put my shin into a couple rocks, and my leg was really all bloody. And as some of you know, that I get kind of bloody on some of these hikes. So actually, that makes it a good hike. And besides that, when I fell into cactus. My shin was hurting, but my foot hurt worse. I had blisters on both feet that I'm going, no, that was hurting. And then as we were going out, I'm going, I lost my GPS, and I broke my camera when I fell. And I stopped and took a picture of of the peak from the road, and I said, well, was it really worth it? And the answer is, of course it was worth it. And one of the reasons was because I got to be registered as an actual completion of the 14ers. I was the 1,418th to officially register for completion. I did Mount Harvard starting in 1982. That was the first one. 29 years later, I finished it by doing Little Bear. And then the local newspaper in Columbia City, Indiana, of all places, put me in the front page of the paper. And that was my parents, of course, really enjoyed that. And you know, Indiana farm country, nobody even really knew what a 14er was. So they're going, I don't know if it's a big deal or not. So you know, that was a lot of fun. And so this last slide I'm going to show you is, I hope, the inspirational slide, so that you guys go out there and maybe do a 14er, but if not, just keep hiking. And the words are kind of taken from a Miley Cyrus song, I think, but I changed the words a little bit. So it's not how fast you go, and I wish Margaret was here, but she's not here. And it's not how high you go, or even how far you go, or even if you get there. It's just the hike. And so everyone here, let's hike on.